Hi, everybody. My name is Joel Butterly. I'm the co-founder of ScholarLaunch. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship and the admissions process. I think that this is an area that is poorly understood and also an area that is very poorly exploited. To start, I think one thing that's important to understand is that the admissions process itself is sort of like an investment. A college is investing in you. They are taking a chance on you. They're giving you the spot versus someone else. They are pouring a huge amount of resources into you as a student through the faculty, through resources on campus, through alumni resources. And so, it is always kind of a cost benefit analysis for these schools in terms of who they let in and who they don't. And that might be a sort of like somewhat cynical view of admissions. I mean, obviously, there is sort of like a genuine educational and academic purpose, a drive towards diversity as well. Like those are all, existing elements of the sort of admissions atmosphere in the higher educational atmosphere. But there's a very real component of this, which is that these schools are investing in you as a student. So in terms of understanding how these investments pay off, most universities, what they're looking at is, do these students go on and do something incredible after they've graduated? Are they a leader in their field? Are they a political leader? Are they a business leader? Are they a leading philanthropist? All of those types of individuals, those who go on and do great things and become, usually leaders in some format. All of those things reflect very well on the school, so for the fact that the vast majority of Supreme Court justices throughout history have come from, two law schools, reflects enormously on those law schools. And indeed, those two law schools have almost always been in the top two of the rankings. I'm sure it's not a total coincidence, although there might be other variables at play there. So this is kind of how an investment in you pays off, is that you go on and you do something great. One of the simplest ways of predicting whether a student is going to do that is looking at whether or not a student has already done that in high school. That is to say, a student who has left a real lasting mark and a positive mark as well in their environment. I find that, generally speaking, entrepreneurship is one of the most effective ways of expressing that you are capable of leaving this kind of mark in your environment, right? So you're doing something completely original. You're not just joining pre-existing student groups. You're not doing competitions or summer programs that 1,000 other students have done. You are doing something that is sui generis, to use a needless legal term. It's to do something completely original. And then to grow it, to build it, to leave sort of an original mark on your environment. A student who does that, I think, is considerably more likely to start new student organizations on campus, to start something original after college, or be a leader in a field, right? So if you can be sort of a leader and a pioneer in high school, that is the best predictor of whether or not you'll be a leader and a pioneer in college. There's sort of an old investing adage that the best predictor of what happens tomorrow is what has happened today. And the same holds true of candidates. So that's one of the primary reasons that I think that entrepreneurship at the high school level is actually one of the most valuable, perhaps even the most valuable, experiences that you can have if done right. And that is, saying a lot. There are a lot of things that you can do. You can do advanced research, with professors or postdoctoral researchers. You can do internships. You can do big competitions. You do all these summer programs. But fundamentally, if you can prove that you've had a successful entrepreneurial experience, and I'll explain what I mean by successful in a minute, that is a huge value add and a real distinguishing feature. Now, another thing that you should understand is that it's also one of the rarest things for students to do. It's sort of interesting. I read this article not so long ago that was talking about how, although we talk constantly about entrepreneurship in our society now, the proportion of our population that is 20-something-year-olds owning their own business is the lowest that it's been in 100 years. That is to say that young entrepreneurship is actually quite a bit weaker than it has been historically. And it's probably because we sort of talk about entrepreneurship, but then people then go work for these enormous tech companies that are called startups rather than starting their own company. But putting that aside, there is a real dearth of entrepreneurship at the higher education level. I mean, if you were to look at the population, the percentage of the students who come from an entrepreneurial background that are admitted to Harvard Business School, you'd be shocked. It's like under 10%. When I first heard about business schools when I was much younger, my assumption was that basically everybody was coming from kind of an entrepreneurial background. But in fact, it's basically no one is coming from an entrepreneurial background. And if you looked at this at the undergraduate level, although I do not have, and I've not seen any statistics that clearly outline how many of the students who kind of get admitted have genuine entrepreneurial experience. I don't think this is a data set that necessarily exists. Although I have anecdotal evidence, I'm guessing that it is infinitesimally smaller than for a school like Harvard Business School. That is all to say that anecdotally, if I had to put a number on it, just based on the thousands of students that I've seen, I would guess that something like 0.1 or less, or fewer, less percent of 0.1 or less percent. Doesn't sound right to me. 0.1 or it's definitely right, or less percent of students have genuine entrepreneurial experience when they apply to college, which is to say that if you can do it and do it right, it's a really tremendous way of differentiating yourself from the competition. And admissions at the end of the day is, it's fundamentally about two things. It's about being academically qualified, and it's about differentiating yourself from other students. And the problem that most families face is that the way they try to differentiate themselves is by doing the exact same thing as other people, but trying to do it a little bit better. And that is not in any way differentiating. So you don't differentiate yourself by, I saw this kid went to UPenn. He was, third ranked debater in Pennsylvania. I'm going to be number 2. That's not how you differentiate yourself. You differentiate yourself by actually doing different things from other people. Entrepreneurship is perhaps the most obvious form of sort of originality in the admissions process. So I mentioned before that we talked just a second about what constitutes successful entrepreneurial experiences. It's not about actually succeeding in the conventional sense, like I build a company and it succeeds. And also, by the way, when I say entrepreneurship, I don't just mean for-profit organizations. It's nonprofit organizations, it's media platforms. I've seen students create really cool, Instagram platforms. So it's not just businesses. It's not just for-profit entities. But so what I mean by successful is I mean that there's something quantifiable about it that you can point to. So that might be, revenue, sales made by a for-profit organization. It might be money fundraised. I've seen students who've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars through, in our Leadership and Innovation Lab program. It could be number of employees that you have, or partners that you have, or number of events that you've hosted. It's quantifiable. It's the sort of thing that you might want to put on a resume, and that you will when you apply to college. So that's what I mean by success. And if it fails, fine. You've learned a tremendous lesson. That doesn't mean that it's not still super useful, but the success metric is something quantifiable about what you've done that showcases how far you've gotten with the project, whether it succeeded in the conventional sense or not. The last thing I'll say here is before we wrap up is, I've talked a lot about sort of, entrepreneurship in the admissions process. And, a lot of families who do our Leadership and Innovation Lab are very interested in sort of the effects of, entrepreneurial experience on the admissions process. There's no question whether or not they say it explicitly or not. It's super effective. That's certainly a benefit of it, although it's not the kind of overriding objective. There are so many other benefits to doing entrepreneurship at a young age, just learning about kind of calculated risk taking, learning about innovation, learning about failure, Most students are terrible at failing because they've never really had to do it. They've been in an environment where if they did A, B, and C, and A, B, and C were clearly outlined for them, they would succeed. And entrepreneurship is usually for these students that work with us in our LIL program, our Leadership and Innovation Lab program. It's really the first time that they can put all of their heart and soul into something, and it can fail catastrophically. And that's devastating for some people, but it's something that you have to go through. It's an incredibly valuable, professional and personal experience. So I couldn't recommend it more, not just for the, getting the experience of the sort of the fight and the grind, but also all of the other skills that it sets you up for, learning how to be persuasive and lead people, learning how to just create an organization, how to set up an LLC or how to set up a bank account. The sort of things that honestly you never learn in school. These aren't skills that are taught, despite the fact that they are skills utilized by every small and large business owner in the United States. There are millions of those. Okay. Anyway, this has gone on a little bit long. I hope this was helpful. This is the first of a longer series. I'm sure that they'll get punchier and more professional as we go on, but for the time being, this will have to suffice. Be well, everybody.